Thank you again, Mr. Spence, for joining us at Families in Action's Let's Talk series. Today we're here to talk with you a bit about discipline and punishment. And let's get the ball rolling. As a parent and educator, tell us, what is the difference between discipline and punishment of a child?
Thank you, Mr. Ramlan, for having me. And the best way I can illustrate the difference between punishment and discipline is to look at the outcomes of the approaches, because one approach is positive, one approach is definitely negative. Basically, in disciplining a child, you are teaching a child. And the discipline approach makes that child learn what is right from what is wrong. The discipline approach helps that child to develop self-control, which ultimately builds and develops his self-discipline. And this is something that will carry him through his life, because you, the parent, are not going to be always with him through all the things that he may have to confront and to deal with in his life. Discipline teaches a respect for authority, not a fear or anxiety about authority. Discipline also builds self-esteem in the sense that the child knows that he is part of the solution, because basically he knows that he can succeed because he's been allowed the opportunity to develop his self-esteem through the discipline process. Discipline also inculcates in that child understanding that there are clear expectations of his behavior and that there will be fair consequences if there is any misbehavior. Notice I said fair consequences. On the other hand, if one thinks about punishment, one of the most basic things that happens about punishment is that it teaches might makes right. And it is okay to strike out in anger. Now when I say might means right, because that parent is larger physically and emotionally than the child, he is able to impose himself on that child. And sometimes that parent is going to strike out in anger. It works for a while, and you may get quick results, but the long-term effect of hitting out and hitting a child is that that child accumulates a degree of anger, which sooner or later is going to express itself. Because the time is going to come when Tim or Mary is going to be almost at your height and weight, and he will hit back at you. There are instances where a child hits back at a parent, and the parent is surprised, but this is an accumulation of the anger from being hit. It interferes with the bond that a child has with a parent, because basically that child is trying to reconcile the person who hits him with the person who loves him, and is trying to decide which is the authentic parent. Discipline, unlike corporal punishment, unlike discipline, distracts the child from the problem at hand, so that the child doesn't have the ability to understand and to process the problem and to deal with the problem, because he's being distracted by the pain of being flogged. And maybe the most important and long-lasting effect of punishing a child and hitting, it teaches a child that they themselves can become hitters, because they see that as the solution to whatever problem that exists. And that vicious cycle of violence perpetuates itself from generation to generation.
Thank you very much. So what tips would you share with parents on disciplining effectively?
For starters, Mr. Ramdan, I think that you must be a good role model. I'm not saying that you've got to be the perfect role model, because that doesn't exist. But children see, absorb, and mimic behaviors. And if you, the parent, are not a good role model, then it's impossible to ask the child to be a good role model and to develop those things that you want the child to develop. You've got to set limits, and in setting those limits, you've got to bear in mind that those limits are going to vary from age to age, so that you try to put in those limits that are age appropriate, so that you find that as the child gets older, you can be a little bit more flexible with those limits that you impose on the child as your standards. You have to have that child in a situation where he understands that there are clear expectations of his behavior and that there are fair consequences if that behavior is not being shown. I think one of the most important tips that I can give a parent is that they've got to be consistent. You cannot afford to have a set of rules on Monday, a different set of rules on Tuesday or Wednesday, and then on Friday go back and try to amend what you've done on. Because the child now, because they are very smart, is able to differentiate and to decide, and sooner or later they are going to be making their rules based upon what the inconsistencies of your rule. It's important, I think, for you to act quickly if there's any misbehavior, since if you leave something to last, even overnight or a day or two, the child is able to process what he has done wrong and maybe try to correct it, or maybe try to add on to what the misbehavior has been. Those are some of the things I think are important for parents to apply to become effective in disciplining.
So tell us, how has Families in Action been promoting such progressive parenting skills?
Right. For the past 20 years, Families in Action has mounted workshops throughout Trinidad and Tobago. And one of the most important topics that we retain throughout most, if not all, of our workshop is effective discipline. We have seen by evidence of parents having gone through the workshops, having absorbed the information, and having implemented some of the skills that we have offered them, we have seen changes in the behaviors. They come back and they report that there are changes in the behaviors of their children. This gives us some comfort in knowing that we are on the right track, and I would expect for the next 20 years that Families in Action will continue to promote positive parenting through its programs, which is one of the best programs that I can think of.